Welcome to Equine-Assisted World. I'm your host, Rupert Isaacson, New York Times best-selling author of The Horse Boy, founder of New Trails Learning Systems and LongRideHome.com. You can find details of all our programs and shows on rupertisaacson.com. Here on Equine-Assisted World, we look at the cutting edge and the best practices currently being developed and established in the equine-assisted field. This can be psychological, this can be neuro-psych, this can be physical, this can be all of the conditions that human beings have that these lovely equines, these beautiful horses that we work with, help us with. Thank you for being part of the adventure, and we hope you enjoy today's show. Welcome back to Equine-Assisted World. I've got Shea Stewart. Shea Stewart, if you listened to her podcast that I did with her over on Live Free, Ride Free, that's our other podcast, you'll know that she's somebody who knows an awful lot about things that we often don't know about, like fascia and mitochondria and the liquid intelligence of the body, which is a thing, and the way light operates in the body, in cells, not as a woo-woo thing, but as a biological thing, and how this affects well-being in all sorts of ways. And she's also a horsewoman and very much in demand as a craniosacral practitioner with horses. Some of you may know that she's been on Warwick Schiller's podcast, Journey On, etc. And I'm always fascinated to talk to Shea, because I always learn it, all the stuff I haven't yet caught up on. It's good. But I wanted her on this show because if you are a practitioner of anything equine assisted, you basically got three things you're always having to bear in mind. Four, really. One is the well-being of your clients and your horses. That's sort of an equal first together. You can't separate one from the other, right? Because if your horse has got no well-being, how are you going to transmit well-being through your horse to a person? But also, if we don't know some things about the human well-being, we might inadvertently fall into some holes which we don't want to. Then, of course, there is the well-being of yourself as the practitioner, because again, if you've got no well-being, unlikely that you'll be able to transmit that to others, no matter how many legs they have. And then, of course, so that there was two, there's now three. And then the last one, of course, is the families, particularly when you're dealing with children or young people, when they go home, what are you sending them home with? Because one of the real limitations, I think, about equine assisted stuff is that it's equine assisted. When people leave that space, they're not taking a horse back to their living room in their apartment building. So how can they keep good things going that might be related to what the horse has given them, or more general things? Shea Stewart is somebody who knows that whole universe. And so if you're an equine-assisted practitioner, or somebody who partakes because you are a service user, i.e. a patient, if you like, or both, many of us are both, Shea Stewart is somebody you want to know about and listen to. And you want to go to her website, and all of that stuff will be available here. So Shea, welcome back, and thank you for coming.
Hi, Rupert. Thank you so much for having me back. I always love our conversations, and I'm happy to be here.
All right. So I very much advise listeners to get a notebook out, because there are going to be some things that Shea talks about that you might be aware of and you might not be aware of, and that you perhaps need to be aware of, or be helpful if you're aware of. And also things that perhaps you have heard of, but you haven't heard well explained, like mitochondria, for example. An important thing. Word we hear. What does it mean? But let's start first with, Shea, you're a craniosacral therapist, first and foremost. That's where it sort of began with you. What is that? How is that helpful to horses and humans? And how has that led you on to these other areas?
Well, so I've been receiving craniosacral since 1987 or 88. And it was
Shortly after the dinosaurs.
shortly after that. Yeah, not
Mm.
too long after that. And this was before,
It's amazing for 3,000 years old. Must be that mitochondria stuff.
it's like because I focus on my mitochondrial health.
Okay. All right. Okay. So
Uh,
you started as a patient, as somebody needing it. Why?
yes, I got it, and this was before massages and chiropractic and all that was really part of.
Mainstream. Yeah.
Yeah. And my sister was a professional ballet dancer, and they always received, interesting things with their body work. And she turned me on to this woman who did craniosacral. And I went there because I had migraines. And what I didn't realize was that I was, those were just a symptom of a dysregulated system. And she helped all that, and I was so drawn to that work that I ended up learning how to do it myself. And so I took some cranial classes, and then I decided to take an advanced 2-year biodynamic course. And one thing I don't know if people are aware of is there are 2 approaches to craniosacral. There's biomechanical and there's biodynamic.
Okay.
And the both of them work. So the grandfather of craniosacral is named William Garner Sutherland. He was a osteopath student who saw that the skull bones were meant to breathe like gills of a fish, all the different plates in the skull. And so he spent his life studying that. And he developed both craniosacral modalities incorporate his 5 principles of the craniosacral system, which is
What are those? Yeah.
the flow of cerebral spinal fluid, the core link, meaning that the dura is free floating. Well, does have some attachments, and it moves independently with
What's Dura?
the spinal cord.
Okay.
So the 5 principles of the craniosacral mechanism is what he calls them. There's the cerebral spinal fluid flow, the dura, the core link, the sutures, the movement of the bones with it. They're all joined together by sutures. So they all have emotion. So that's the nervous system, how it acts independently of this. And so it basically is an approach that works on the nervous system through the flow of the cerebral spinal fluid and the movement of the bones and the tissues. So there's a rhythm that these go. And then later on in his life, he found that when he was called to work on a dying man, he felt that there was a presence in the room that moved through the person. And this, when he called this, he was a Christian mystic. He called this the breath of life, which we now call primary respiration. So he had his first 5 principles, and then he had 4 more after that, which start with primary respiration, the mutual field between practitioner and client, the relational field is what he called it. And the biomechanical approach, their entry point into the craniosacral system is through the cranial rhythmic impulse, which is, if you look at the body as being like an ocean that's contained within skin, there's different waves of movement. There's the surface waves, which are just like the ocean, which are a little faster. And then as you go deeper, the motions get slower. So the biomechanical approach, their entry point into the system is the faster surface cranial rhythmic impulse, which is not really fast. It's a impulse that's 6 to 12 minutes per cycle, which is this actually, ironically, is the same. I don't know if it's ironic. It's the same wave as the geometric pulse of the earth. And
Makes sense.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that 6-minute cycle is also the timing of the coherent breath. So it's a slow rhythm. And then the biodynamic approach, we focus on William Garner Sutherland's later principles, which the entry point is primary respiration, which is the deep, long tide, the stabilizing rhythm of the body. So it's like the slow rhythm that stabilizes and supports life. CRI may come up in a session, but we focus more on the slower rhythms. So that's mainly the difference. But with this, we also look at the embryos, our archetype. So when we're just a single cell post fertilized egg, the fluids in the cell know what our body's going to be. And these fluids have memory. It's like a blueprint of us. And this fluid has the memory of us. So we access the fluid body and the person or the client, whatever, the horse, accessing what we call the inner embryo, which is the origins of our health. And the fluid body, this is what got me into quantum biology is, so in the biodynamic world, we focus on the fluid body and the rhythm of primary respiration. And quantum biology, it actually explains what the fluid body is from a scientific point of view.
Please go on. What is quantum biology? I'm actually Googling it as I ask you this.
Oh, you are?
Yeah. But please
Um,
tell us because it sounds intriguing.
so quantum biology is basically the study of mitochondrial health through light, water, magnetism. Those are the basic principles of quantum biology. It's the intersection of quantum physics and biology.
Right. What I've got here is quantum biology is the field of study that investigates processes in living organisms that cannot be accurately described by the classical laws of physics. This means that quantum theory has to be applied to understand these processes. Would you say that's fair or?
Not really. I mean,
Okay.
they can be explained. There are people that are way smarter in the field than I am because it's something that I've just been studying the last year. But it is a lot to do with the way our mitochondria function.
Okay.
Protons, electrons.
Right. It's interesting too. It seems to go back to Schrödinger, who a lot of people know the name, but they don't know who he was. He was the guy who did the experiment with light. Is light a photon, i.e. a fixed thing, or is it a wave? And he found out that it was both because that argument had been raging for centuries. And he proved in an experiment that you could trap a light wave in a very narrow thing that was visible to the naked eye. And when you didn't look at it, it was a wave. And when you looked at it, or when something measured it, it was a particle. And that therefore superposition things could be different things at once. Like when you toss a coin and it's spinning in the air before it comes down, it's both heads and tails, right? It's both in potential. And then it's only when it hits the ground and you observe it that you see which one it is. Very similar. So I'm interested now. Let's ground this. Two things. One, craniosacral work. When my son Rowan was at his most severe, I took him for craniosacral work and he couldn't stand even the gentlest attentions of the therapist because it seemed to overwhelm him. So we would wait till Rowan had fallen asleep. And then the craniosacral person would work on him very gently while he slept in that deep sleep. So, and then we'd take him home and we'd do this about 11 o'clock at night. Shows what you'll do as an autism parent, drive an hour in to sit down, hour out, to do this. But there always was a difference in him afterwards. And then the second thing is those people who know our work with movement method know that one of the things we do is sacral rocking that enhances not just oxytocin, feeling good and connected and communicative, but also your cerebral spinal fluid flow, which of course is good in all sorts of ways. So but I had not until I met you run into terms like quantum biology or living a circadian lifestyle or quantum lifestyle as things that could be beneficial for horses and humans. And I'm going to get you to explain those. And then, the experiences that we've had with the work that we do, particularly with autism and communication, seems always to be enhanced by sacral rocking. So, and then one of the first neuroscientists to endorse horseboy method and movement method was a guy called Dr. Robert Navio, who was the head of the Mitochondrial Institute in University of California, San Diego. So this brings us to this word mitochondria, which the mighty chondria, the mighty anaconda. Well, no, that one's brain could go other ways there. But this is a word that gets battered around, like cerebral spinal fluid. One can sort of picture it. There's a fluid in the spine. It goes up and down. It has a bunch of different functions that we could go into, but it's a biological thing. It's there. We know it's there. You can open someone's spine and there it is. You can open up their brain and there it is. Mitochondria is something which I think many people hear the word, don't really know what it means, realize that it's important because more and more people seem to talk about it. And there are whole university chairs based around it. And it seems to have something to do with neuroscience. So here's a question for you. You fell into this whole mitochondrial thing through your adventure with cerebral spinal fluid in a way, in this primary respiration that you're talking about. What is mitochondria and why should horsey people trying to help other people know about it?
Well, mitochondrial health is greatly not looked at in our healthcare system. Yet, I believe it's one of the most important aspects of our biology. Mitochondrial health and our fluid body, I believe, are the most important aspects. So mitochondria are actually, they're organelles that live inside each cell. So every cell in our body has thousands to millions of mitochondria inside of them.
Little organs doing stuff, telling the cell to do stuff.
Yep, they are known as the energy makers, like I can't think of the term people use with it. Basically, they make ATP, which is an energy, but that's not all they do. They make CO2, they make water, they make infrared light, they make oxygen, and they need special things in order to do this. And the most important thing that they make is water. It's a deuterium depleted water. But mitochondria need electrons in order to do this. And they also need light frequencies in order to function properly.
Just quickly, you mentioned something called ATP, and I went, "Ooh, what's that?" when it's at home. So just for listeners, it's chemical energy produced by the mitochondria chemical energy produced by the mitochondria is stored in a small molecule called adenine triphosphate, ATP. Okay. So it's like the battery storage. Okay.
Yep.
Got it.
Exactly. A little semiconductor, a little battery.
Mm-hmm.
So
the mitochondria are these organelles that make the cell function to do all these good things for our well-being. We need CO2 for things. We need oxygen for things. Infrared light. What do we need infrared light for?
Well, to make heat
Ah,
is one of the things.
okay.
That's what infrared light is heat.
So
Uh,
thermoregulation, mitochondria,
yep, and that
stopping you
heat
getting
that
too
we
hot, too cold.
Yep, and that heat that we make can actually structure our internal water. So if you think about the water in our body, it surrounds everything. It surrounds every protein, every cell.
Mm.
It lines our blood vessels. It lines our arteries. Glycocalyx is a form of water that lines the arteries and blood vessels. It's in our cerebral spinal fluid. It's in our blood plasma. Water is everywhere. And this water is basically the means of communication of every biological function in our body. And this water needs to be in a structured state, which means that it's in a coherent state. So if you think about, if you want to go even more quantum and get down to what a water molecule is, oxygen and to hydrogens, and these always form an angle, bond angle is what it's called. And when it's at a certain angle, it can form patterns, geometric clusters, and they structure together. It's like a symphony playing together. What happens if this water is not structured? It becomes what they call bulk water, and bulk water is basically inflammation in the body. And every cell in our body needs a negative charge that this water provides,
Why do we need a negative charge?
because we run on a DC electrical current because of the electrical current that's needed in our bodies in order to function.
Got it. The spark of life.
Yeah.
Okay. So someone's listening to this going, all right, well, I'm shoveling shit right now, listening to Rue and Shea talk about this mitochondria thing. And I've got, the kids who are coming, or I've got, a group coming for their equine-assisted thing in 15 minutes. Why should I care for my horse or for
Well,
and okay, about this mitochondrial thing? And okay, I can be aware of it, but what does my awareness of it allow me to do to be better for my horse and for my human?
I think it's understanding our biology better so we can be optimal.
Okay.
Because when our mitochondria is optimal, then we we can think better. We have we have a better ability to be creative and not so dogmatic on things. We become more open. We The movement that you talked about, that's one of the ways we also get electrons that help our mitochondria. We just become we're just healthier all around. Our mitochondria can it actually dis it we don't notice a dysfunction in our mitochondria until it's dysfunctioning at about 70%.
Okay.
So once we notice something wrong, like my back pain that I've been dealing with, that's when when it if you boil everything down in the quantum world, we believe that all diseases, all health issues come down to a mitochondrial dysfunction.
Mhm.
And our modern lifestyle is dysfunctioning it at a high rate of speed because of the light environment we live in, the tech use, the indoor life, we're always seeking comfort. None of these do any or beneficial to our mitochondrial health. And the same with our animals. they're like canary in the coal mines when it comes to mitochondrial dysfunction, or the things that are dysfunctioning our mitochondria. They're even more sensitive to it. And some people are more sensitive than others. Women are more sensitive because we need that energy to create life. So that, in a sense, makes us more sensitive to things that aren't natural to our biology.
Okay, so what can I do as an equine assisted practitioner to optimize the mitochondrial health first of my horses? Because that's who I'm going to be working through to these humans that come to. Then we'll get to the humans. How can I
Okay.
optimize my mitochondria? How do I get quantum horses?
Quantum horses.
Loads more horses. Sorry. That's what we all do.
Yes. So things that the things in our life that mitochondria love are native electromagnetic frequencies,
Okay. Why?
because that's what
That's
help.
plugging into the earth. That's plugging
Yep.
into the natural rhythm.
That's yep.
Okay, got
The
it.
only electromagnetic frequency that our biology understands is that from the sun and that from the earth.
Okay.
The Schumann resonance, the geometric magnetic pulse, the light frequencies from the sun. This is connecting to nature. So our horses, they also rely on a circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm is not just, oh, I'm up during the day and I'm asleep at night.
Mm-hmm.
It's every single cell in our body relies on a circadian rhythm. The cells in our kidneys, the cells in our lungs, the cells in our liver. And when there's a dysfunction, a lot of times it's because the circadian rhythm of that actual body part can be off. And usually it's a body part that has more mitochondria. So we have more mitochondria in our heart and our brain and women and the eggs. So a lot of our dysfunctions are, cardiovascular diseases, stuff, things like dementia and things like that. So for horses, what we can do from a quantum perspective to keep our horses healthy and living in a proper circadian lifestyle would be outside in sunrise, no fly masks on. Ideally, the sun should also touch their fur. So fly sheet or blankets, some horses need the warmth, but it is nice for them to get full spectrum sun at some point. Morning is good. Solar noon is good. No barn lights at night. Anytime a light is turned on after the sun goes down, it's a melatonin disruptor. It basically stops the production of melatonin. It stops the release of melatonin that's been producing all day from serotonin.
Mm-hmm.
So when we have a light on in the barn, not only does that disrupt the processes that the body's going through in order to shut down, to go to sleep, to heal and repair, but a lot of these lights also have that flicker that we talked about. It's not something that you can see visibly, but all LED lights have this. And the flicker in an LED light is different from the flicker from the old incandescent bulbs because it actually turns on and then all the way off, all the way on, all the way off. And it happens at like 150 times a second. so we don't see it. But you can actually put if you have an iPhone, you can put it on slow motion mode and video your lights and
Okay,
see if
interesting.
they have flicker. And what this flicker, and I've seen it in barns where I can feel it now because I'm so, that's the thing, is once you become aware of this stuff, you sense it sooner. And I went to a barn, and the horse that I was working on I could tell he was stressed at the time. He was at the tying rack. He kept stretching and yawning and stretching and yawning, but not like a good stretch or yawn. It just seemed stressed. And the lights I could feel the stress coming from the lights. So I videoed them, and the flicker was just insane. So I had her turn the barn lights out. It was daylight. You don't need lights in the barn during the day when there's light coming in. And horse immediately relaxed. All that behavior stopped. He took a deep breath and was like, okay.
Very interesting what you say, because with autism, one of the known negative sensory triggers that Dr. Temple Grandin first turned me on to when I was a young autism dad was fluorescent strip lights and LED lights, and to get rid of them in the home environment as much as possible. And we did, and it definitely worked for the same reasons that you talked about. And I notice, frequently when I'm going into therapy barns and they've got these massive fluorescent strip lights on, it's like, dude, this is not gonna work well. But
Yeah.
devil's advocate, we are in Northern England or Norway or Upper Peninsula Michigan, and it's getting dark at 2 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever, and the kids need to come for their sessions. You got to have lights on, and so there's going to be a whole evening session that you just can't avoid. So what do we do to make sure that that isn't detrimental?
Well, there are companies that are making circadian friendly non-flicker light bulbs. There's a whole
Are they doing them on the big enough scale that you could light an arena with them or a barn?
I know there was somebody in my applied quantum biology course I took who was designing lights. He was in the UK, I think, and he worked for a light designing company. I could ask him if they.
But let's say, I'm a stressed barn owner and I haven't got time to contact this dude in England for something he might or might not have access to, and that I might or might not be able to access because I'm in Canada. I don't know. What can I do, given that it's a non-ideal situation? What can I do to mitigate those effects as best I can
Well,
in that dark time of the year?
yeah. If you can buy better bulbs, look for some places you can still buy incandescent bulbs.
Mm-hmm.
Incandescent bulbs are better because they have the infrared in them. That's why they stopped making them, because of the energy production, the energy coming from them. So now we have LED bulbs that are like one spectrum of blue, 450 nanometers or something of blue. And our biology does not understand that spectrum of light, because our biology does not understand that anything that's isolated, any of those light spectrums that are isolated, because the sun is like almost 50% red and infrared, the light that comes from the sun. And so when we take a bulb that's got an isolated spectrum of blue, the body doesn't understand that. So one of the main things that happens, there's lots of studies on PubMed about this, but the first thing that happens is our glucose spikes, and our bodies are very intelligent, and it spikes as a protection against that light. So when we're in the barn at night and we're under LED lights, these are things that are just happening. It happens with horses too, because they're mammals and they have mitochondria as well. So one thing that I did in my house before I started replacing all the bulbs is I bought that red vinyl tape you use to put on like a broken tail light.
Okay.
And I put that tape over all the little night lights, the refrigerator lights, anything that I could tape.
You end up with a bunch of red light.
Yes.
Okay.
So technically, you could do that in a barn if you need the lights. Even if you don't want to do all of them, you could do some of them.
Some of them.
Or other
Because
thing,
presumably you need some bright light so you can see
yeah.
how to do some things. Yeah.
The other thing you could do is you could add red lights. So barn aisles, arenas, those are going to be LED or fluorescent lights, which is um, that isolated spectrum of blue that's causing. They've actually traced diabetes to this,
Mm.
and you can look up the studies, but it's hard because since the invention of lights, we completely changed our lifestyle. Like, okay, we can be up all night now, but but our biology has not caught up to that. So what you could do in a barn or an arena is incorporate some red lights just to help diffuse that isolated blue. You're not going to fix the flicker with that though. You have to get special flicker-free bulbs. Um,
How
my
easy are those to get?
there's I could send you a list of companies that sell them.
Okay, so if I'm a barn owner, should I be looking at flicker-free bulbs
Yeah.
and taping some stuff red
Yep.
and having some red light, which will maybe give me a warmer light anyway in my barn? I mean, one of the things that's often
Yes.
difficult in those barns, it can feel very cold. And the
Yes.
weather outside is cold and then the light is cold.
Yeah. And
Something I think, yeah,
if you can find incandescent bulbs, those are the best. I can still find those in the US. I know some countries are completely banned, but
something which I found helpful was because when I'm doing, say, an equine assisted session in the evening, I don't actually need very bright lights for that because I'm not jumping. I'm not needing to see my way exactly into a fence, where dull light, could be dangerous or something like that. So
yeah.
I, in some cases, even worked to candlelight.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing, which in an arena, particularly a small arena, you really can, or even switching off half the lights and only having part of the lights on and switching them on. What I started experimenting with sometimes was switching them on down the end of the arena, but working a little bit in the less lit bit of the arena so that we weren't fully. I've sort of played around with these things and it's, I would say I've observed good effects with the kids. What I didn't necessarily look to was the effects with the horses because, my understanding of equine well-being, what I've grown up with is so much about fitness and muscle building and brain development and keeping them interested, and obviously giving them a naturalistic lifestyle as much as possible. Not everybody can, and I'm aware of this. And I don't want to shame people who can't. Like, we've got a really good horse boy and movement method practice in the middle of Dublin. And it's a really important service. They're serving urban kids who would never get access to this normally. We think, oh, Ireland, everyone's got horses, but actually Dublin's as urban as anywhere else. And they don't have the facilities. They do what they can, and they're inventive and they also send their horses out regularly and rotate them out to the country for long breaks in fields for a few weeks and then bring. So, they're doing their equine well-being as well as they possibly can. But with the best will in the world, we know that not everybody can have the state
Yeah.
of Montana as, their backyard sort of thing.
We all
So
can't have 1,000 acres for our horses to run free on. And
indeed.
yeah, you do the best you can.
You're the best.
I have that too in my barn that I had in California.
Uh-huh. So how did you get around that when you were running your barn?
When they were lived in small paddocks. So I just got them out as much as I could. I made their turnouts interesting, with like a new branch for them to
Like, how did you,
play with, or, barrels, to go around, things to keep their brain engaged. I made sure their living space, they were next to horses they liked. It's no fun living in such a tight space with somebody you don't like. So
sure a lot of people are laughing.
I made
Done that
sure,
points in our
yeah. I also made sure they always had something, to chew on, some hay or
Yeah.
twigs or, whatever. But yeah, we do the best we can with
Yeah.
what we have. And there are things we can't always control how much space we have, but we
Mhm.
can control the lighting environment and the other non-native EMFs. We can control that.
What's an EMF?
An EMF is an electromagnetic field,
Okay.
and it's basically can be thought of as a light wave, like a non-visible,
Mm.
because we have, there's visible light waves and there's non-visible light waves. The other thing about the lighting is lighting at night from a quantum health perspective should come from lower areas, not above. So if you want to think about mimicking the sun, at solar noon, the sun is, above our heads. Every color of the rainbow is out at solar noon from the sun. And each different light spectrum tells our body to do different things. When we're inside an artificial light, so the sun, the color is always changing as it goes across the sky. It comes up, when it's rising, it's red, infrared, it's a real rich blend of red. And then when it hits about 10 degrees, that's when UVA comes up. And UVA tells we have aromatic amino acids that live in the back of our eyes. And there's a suprachiasmatic nucleus that goes from our eye to our hypothalamus. And these different spectrums tell these things to do different processes. So UVA rise tells the tryptophan, which is an aromatic amino acid, to catalyze into serotonin, which then at night that catalyzes into melatonin when darkness comes. So if you think about natural light, it's doing all kinds of things. Artificial light is one spectrum, and it's a spectrum we don't understand.
Mm.
And if you have it on in the barn all the time, I mean, luckily most barns do get natural light that comes in and kind of diffuses it. But if you think about light coming from up above at night, it's another strike against what's natural. So it should be a light that's below our eye levels. That's a more diffused amber tone.
I'm picturing a riding arena with wall sconces with
Yeah.
the being thrown up, like you
Yeah.
might see in a beautiful equestrian display at some big equestrian show like Cavalia that you've paid money to go see. And it's interesting how the lights in those sorts of shows, of course, are always very warm and are very seldom bright top down.
Yeah.
Because to create the magical feel, or when you go to a romantic restaurant, you don't want this
Yes.
interrogation light lighting up all the pores
Yeah.
on your face. every little blemish you've got, you want
Yeah.
candlelight to kind of,
Yeah.
you've got the best in you. And it's so interesting that the therapeutic environments that we work in are not lit like that. Um, and I'm thinking back to when I was a boy, although in our stable yard, yeah, we had electricity. There was no like big light that came on when you went out into the stable yard, like the sort of stuff that's just so ubiquitous now. I remember when
Yeah.
those came in, and we put one in and it was awful, awful. And people got very excited. Oh, yes, great, because we can really see what we're doing at night now. And I remember thinking, oh, yeah, but it's so harsh. It hurts.
Yeah.
Before that, we went out with torches or we went out with actually kerosene lanterns. Um,
Yeah.
but of course, there's had the problem of, well, what if you dropped it and set fire to your pond?
Yeah.
There were some limitations to those. But nonetheless, things felt more human. Okay, so if this type of lighting, for example, oh, just one last thing about people keeping their horses in unideal situations. I was just doing this is a tip for people if you're in this position. I saw something really good in Rotterdam. I was just in very urban situation in the Netherlands a few weeks ago. And these guys, they got no grazing at all. They've got a covered arena, and then they've got an area of maybe 20 feet around it, which they fenced off that the horses can wander around in. And that's it. That's it. But the horses have free access to wander in and out, which is interesting. And one of the first things they do in the morning, so the horses stand on sort of wood chippings, but the wood chippings often get churned up and a bit muddy. And so there's dry areas, wet areas, this sort of thing. And the first thing which the person coming in to sort of do the horses in the morning did was go cut a bunch of willow, because of course it's the Netherlands, so everything is even urban. There's water and willows kind of everywhere, and just cut, and then chuck that in for the horses to graze on, nibble on, browse on. And of course, as we know, willow is also medicinal. It's also deals with pain, deals with and several times in the day they were going out and cutting stuff like this and sort of throwing it in there to enrich the environment. And then the other thing which we were doing was a lot of what we call crazy time, which is just flat out encouraged interactive play with the horses, effectively free jumping in groups, but changing the obstacles every 2 minutes to keep the horses like, ooh, a new thing, ooh, and then making these into the therapy sessions themselves, so that instead of trying to think, oh shit, I've got to do the crazy time before the kids come, it's like, no, we're going to do that with the kids and keep them safe while we do it, and teach them horsemanship and teach them math, because we're going to measure out the distances and the heights and and then we're going to do physics. We're going to do speed by getting distance over time, timing them. We know how many meters it is down that long side. How fast are they going? How fast can you run down that thing? And so we found ways to incorporate this kind of well-being into this non-ideal area. I just wanted to throw that in there because, a lot of us are dealing with less than ideal living.
Yeah. I know somebody who feeds in the winter, feeds her horse just whatever is around in nature. So that's the other thing, is we end up feeding them hays that are imported. Sometimes you have to, but I would encourage people to try to get grass hays that are grown as local as possible or as close to your latitude as possible, because our mitochondria looks at food as an electron, a light source.
Mm.
So in the quantum world, eating out of season and the non-local food can actually be considered a toxin. So like if you live in Germany, you should not be eating a pineapple that was imported from Costa Rica in December, because you're sending your body the wrong light signaling. And it's the same with horses. Try to get them food that's as local and seasonal as possible.
Yeah, it's interesting. We go out. We're in a big apple growing area in this bit of Germany that we're in right now. A lot of the apples go unharvested, and a lot of them in our area are heirloom. They're old varieties that,
Mhm.
and so a lot of the orchards aren't even tended anymore. And
Wow.
so one of the things I do with the kids that come in the winter is we go and we collect apples and pears that have fallen and fill up great wheelbarrows with them. And it's cool because we get to see that the wild boar have also been there before us and they've been, chewing it. So you learn a lot, this way. And then we have throwing matches to throw them into the areas where the horses are. You can throw them. So you can bounce one off the roof. And I've got horses that you can bounce them off the horse and they don't care. It's like, can you get one off Hidalgo's butt? And
Yeah.
they love it, of course. But of course, what we're doing is giving the horses browse that they would normally have access to that maybe they might not, because I don't happen to own that orchard. I can't
Yeah.
take them out there. And one can have a lot of fun with this kind of thing. But it's interesting that you talk about things as a source of light and electrical energy, food, and so on. I think this is something that's really good to draw people's attention to, that everything does come down to light at the end of the day. And that's a really hard thing to get your head around, is that that's not light, that's an apple, or that's not light, that's a donut, or that's a thing that's dense and solid and absorbs light, or reflects light off it perhaps, but it's not itself light. But of course, everything kind of is light. Can you explain to in layman's terms why sort of everything is light in a way that doesn't make them just think, oh, this is woo woo?
Yeah. Well, everything, you can look at it as a frequency.
Okay. Everything
And
has an electrical frequency. That is true.
yeah.
You can plug a battery into a potato, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even, yeah,
So what you're saying is some frequencies are good for you and some are not.
correct.
Okay.
And and this is just not something been studied a lot. Robert O. Becker, John, there's all kinds of scientists that have studied this. Unfortunately, it's not been adapted into our healthcare system because to improve mitochondrial function, there's not really a profit and things for us to do, like get outside, ditch your sunglasses, turn the Wi-Fi off at night. All those things are free. These are free things we can do to improve mitochondrial function. Um, and there, and we look at mitochondria, they can be looked at as our sixth sense because they sense the electromagnetic fields around us. They sense the lights and they do things with that information. It's all information that our body's receiving to do special things. And one of the most important things that our body does with that information is make internal water, our internal fluid body. And then there are things that prevent our mitochondria from doing that. And those are the non-native EMFs. The
Electromagnetic fields.
the ones that are man-made are causing mitochondrial damage and preventing our fluid body, preventing our mitochondria from making the water it needs, the water that our cells need. Our internal water is actually more important than the water we drink. And it's like you can look at our fluid body or our internal water as a part of our anatomy. It's an anatomical structure, so to speak,
Okay.
that gets highly ignored. Yet it's very important to to have that inner hydration for everything to be optimal.
Why might we want to turn off the Wi-Fi at night?
Well, so like I said earlier, the only electromagnetic field that our body recognizes comes from the sun and the earth. And there's a spectrum, like the Schumann resonance is anywhere from 7.83 to 20 hertz, it fluctuates. And our alpha wave of our brain is 7.83 hertz. And so that's a resonance that we're supposed to be part of. The geomagnetic pulse, the Mayer wave is 0.1 hertz, which is that 6 cycles per minute thing that I talked about earlier, the motion of our cranial rhythmic impulse, the motion that our cerebral spinal fluid, the measurement of that wave going up down our spine is 7 cycles a minute.
By the way, for
6
listeners,
cycles a minute.
it's called a Schumann resonance, not because the German composer Schumann wrote his music to this resonance, because it sounds like it ought to be, a resonance by Schumann. That sounds rather nice. It's actually after Otto, another German, Otto Schumann, or Winifred Otto Schumann, who first studied the theoretical aspects of the global resonances of the Earth ionosphere waveguide system, known today as the Schumann resonance. And in 1952 to 1954, Schumann, together with a man called Koenig, attempted to measure the resonant frequencies. But it was not until measurements were made by someone called Beiser and Wagner in 1960 to 1963 that adequate analysis techniques were available to extract the resonance information from the background noise. Since then, there has been an increasing interest in Schumann resonances in a variety of fields. So yeah, this goes back to early 20th century science. It's not something new, and it's not invented by hippies like Rupert. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or sadly by the composer Schumann. But
Yeah.
what's interesting is what you're talking about there is slowing things down effectively. That something like 5G, it's fast, right? That's the whole point.
Yeah. I was just looking for my building biology notes. I don't know if I can find them this quick, but basically Wi-Fi is like 2.5 to 5 gigahertz.
Yeah.
So a hertz is one vibration per second. Is it one vibration per second or per minute? That's what I wanted.
A minute sounds very slow. I'm looking it up with you. So it's quite good, listeners. We're not pretending to be gurus here. We need to consult our notes too. So how fast, what speed is 1 cycle per second?
Per second. One vibration per second.
Yeah.
So a gigahertz, and this is why I wanted to look at my building biology notes, because I have I know where I have it. It's like 1 billion vibrations per second.
That's quite fast. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you think about that vibration on our biology,
I see.
when we're the fastest one we're used to is maybe up to 100 hertz.
Right.
Probably
but the Earth and the Sun, it's roughly in the 6 to 7 range, right? And the alpha brainwave state, which is the sort of meditative state, is 8 to 12.
Yeah, about 7. It's the same as the Schumann resonance.
Right. Okay. And then the beta brainwave, which is our sort of cheerful, all right, Shea, cup of tea, Shea. How'd you like your tea? Milk, no sugar. Lovely, jubbly. That sort of functional, cheerful, going through life. That's seems to be our fastest functional one, between 12 and 35 hertz. It's a big range, but it can also be it's your attention's on, but there can be anxiety involved with that one. Alpha brainwave, very relaxed, passive attention. That's 8 to 12. Theta brainwave, deeper meditation, 4 to 8 hertz. Now we're going down below
Yeah.
the Schumann resonance, deeply relaxed, inwardly focused. And then there's
Yeah.
delta, which
Deltas, deep
point
sleep.
0.5 to 4, which is rapid eye movement sleep, right?
Yeah. And that 0.1 hertz, which is the same motion of our cerebral spinal fluid.
Right. Okay.
So those are the frequencies.
Now talk to us about cerebral spinal fluid and frequencies, because I know cerebral spinal fluid from a couple of angles. One is that the more of it you have, so sacral rocking is a good thing for that because it makes you produce more of it. Your stem cells that replace the dead cells of your gut, heart, and brain, which are all neurons, get replaced more efficiently, a bit like a factory conveyor belt operating better. So if you've got more cerebral spinal fluid, that's just all happening better. The cerebral spinal fluid is also a crash, sort of not helmet, but a shock absorber between your skull and your brain. That's quite useful for those of us that like to fall off horses. And also it makes your spine more elastic. So it's to do with your biological age. You know, you feel, appear, and actually sort of are biologically younger when you have more of it. And of course, within that, there's also the theory that around the pineal gland, you were talking about melatonin being where the serotonin, the pineal gland, among other things, you know, changes our serotonin into melatonin. Sarah gets us up in the morning. Mel puts us to bed at night. That's very nice. But if there's enough cerebral spinal fluid pressing around the pineal gland, it can cause that melatonin to go through another molecular shift and become dimethyl through an electrical charge, through friction of little crystals being rubbed together in the pineal gland, pushed by that fluid from the outside. And of course, dimethyltryptamine, DMT, is strong hallucinogen and makes us see God and angels and things. And that's all rather nice. But there's much more to cerebral spinal fluid than that. And liquid intelligence, these frequencies, to slow things down or to speed things up. If the cerebral spinal fluid is one of the intelligent liquids in our bodies, helping mitochondria do its thing well, how does a slow frequency beneficially affect of light or whatever, back to the lighting in the barn or the 5G that might be floating about? How does slowing that down, so changing the lighting, switching off the Wi-Fi at night, help the cerebral spinal fluid do its thing better for the mitochondria? And how does speeding it up not help?
So
In verse, please, Shakespearean verse.
I'll try my best to do that.
There was a young man from Australia. Sorry.
If you break it down even more quantum and go and think about the water
Okay.
in our body, water has been proven now that it carries information, it stores memory,
Yeah.
it transmits information. That's what cerebral spinal fluid does as well. Like a liquid crystalline structure. And we need our one of, like, the rocking, the sacral rocking. It does enhance the cerebral spinal fluid flow, but another thing that's doing is it's helping the mitochondria produce electrons. Because one of the ways we get electrons is through movement.
Okay.
And
Yeah, like a dynamo battery, friction produces, movement.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And then the other ways we get electrons is through light frequencies. So if these frequencies are too fast from Wi-Fi, I finally found my building biologist notes an
Okay.
hour later. Wi-Fi, 5G, Wi-Fi is in the gigahertz range. mobile phones are in the gigahertz range. So when we're getting bombarded with those pulses, it's preventing our mitochondria from making the internal water we need. It's also just which that will then disrupt the flow of cerebral spinal fluid.
I
It
see.
it destructures the water. Because remember this our internal water needs to be in a structured, coherent state, which means it has geometric patterning within the water molecule. And when we get bombarded with these electromagnetic fields that are not native, it destructures that water. So it
Okay,
loses
so
it.
it smashes up the crystalline
Yeah,
system
they lose their ability to communicate with
that
each other.
carries the information to
Yeah,
help the mitochondria to do its thing.
it's like a tuning fork. If you hit a tuning fork, the tuning fork that has that same vibration will vibrate.
Mm.
Or if you have that's kind of what the water's doing and it goes through our body way faster than biochemistry can move. So you can also think of it as a symphony orchestra.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, the clarinet, the reed broke and it's squeaking instead of playing. And then the guy's freaking out, so he can't play anymore. And there's this tune that doesn't flow right. It's going to disrupt the whole sound coming from that orchestra. That's what's happening in our body when we're getting exposed to these things. And we're all exposed to them because it's everywhere. All we
Mm.
can do is try to mitigate it as best we can. And when our body is not able to make the internal water we need, the cells lose that positive charge, and then health declines.
How
And
is that linked to inflammation and autoimmune?
well, that's where it all starts. Inflammation is bulk water. Inflammation is water that no longer has a structure.
Ah. So if you disrupt the crystalline structure of the water that is carrying all this biological information around and is electrically charged in a certain way to put that information into action, if you disrupt that with stuff that's too fast, it becomes bulk water and builds up rather than flowing through, and that's inflammation. And then
Mhm.
that triggers autoimmune stuff as well as
Yeah.
chronic pain, mitochondrial disorders, fibromyalgia.
Yeah,
Ah,
and yeah, fibromyalgia, MS. In one of my quantum biology groups, there's a lot of people that are very sick in these. And just by addressing their mitochondria health, they're getting better. So I know a couple people that have diagnosed MS, and they don't have any signs of it anymore just by they had to make huge changes. I mean, that a lot of people, might not be able to, but just by and fibromyalgia and I mean all kinds of autoimmune things. It's just a mitochondrial dysfunction. So we need to learn ways to
right. So if we're
recognize
working in environments where there's just a ton of shit lighting and adding to that, maybe you've got some power lines nearby, and adding to that, maybe you've got 5G floating about, and adding to that, you've got this, and adding to that, you've got that. You can
yeah.
expect some knock-on effects in yourself for non-well-being, for your horses in non-well-being, and for the clients that you're working with in non-well-being. That I get. So we looked at some potential mitigating solutions. You said you could change the lighting, you could make it redder, you could make it more natural, you could make it more from the ground up, not from the top down. You said you could switch off the Wi-Fi at night.
The Wi-Fi is huge.
Okay.
And then, and especially for children,
What about
if
lights? What about security lights that come on and off and that sort of thing? Through, let's say it's in the barn, and there's lights coming on and off.
I
Oh,
I would change them to red bulbs.
okay. Okay. So if you feel that you've got to have a security light, change it to a red bulb.
Yeah.
And at least if
And you
that's
can
coming on and off it.
yeah, you can easily get red bulbs. Some people even get lighting, reptile lighting from the pet stores
Ooh.
because those you can get different
Oh
spectrums.
yeah, the ones that you use to hatch chickens.
Yeah, those. And then there's UV lights and yeah, there's all kinds of lights for lizards.
Right. And those are okay after dark if they come on?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, you don't want them on. You want your lights low at night. You don't want these, bright, blinding
Yeah.
lights. And people, I hear people complain that they don't see well. They don't have good night vision, and that's a direct symptom of having too many lights on at night and not getting and wearing sunglasses during the day. So your pupils are losing that ability to fully dilate or fully contract so you can see properly.
One of the other things which we often encourage people to do with, say, horse boy movement method is work outside. And the reason for that is just fewer bad sensory triggers, of course, in nature, because we're an organism, we're designed for nature. So do we want to be in an arena which is relatively sterile? Or if possible, do we want to be out on planet Earth where, we're supposed to be? And also we want the child or the person to respond to the natural world because that puts your brain on high alert. We want them walk you places across fields or on woodland paths where they have to think a bit about where they put their feet because that creates the protein BDNF in the brain-derived neurotrophic factor, increases cognitive function, blah, blah, blah. But what I hadn't thought about it from a point of view before is, of course, if one goes outside, then one can get away from some of these not so good, what you're calling EMFs. So if one is working with one's clients constantly in arena, client comes in the arena, Bob, there's your session, 10-minute break for a cup of tea. Another client comes in for the arena, Bob. Before you know it, you've looked up and you've spent 10 hours in an arena, and so have your horses. Is another reason to get out of the arena for your work so that you can help your mitochondria.
Oh yeah, you need to be out in that natural light. And
It's something because we think, oh, well, yeah, natural light, vitamin D, people get that. But it's a relatively new concept, I think, for a lot of people, this idea of it'll help your mitochondria. So again, just because this is new for people, I know for you, you've gone, where you live in that rabbit hole, but so you've got very long ears now. They're very fetching. For people who are still getting to grips with that, why is being outside going to help their mitochondria and therefore help them with chronic pain, autoimmune, blah, 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 and their horses too, skin conditions, why is the outside going to help?
because we're circadian animals.
Okay.
We need to be in sync with the sun, the light from the sun, the different rays from the sun, the different light spectrums. And we need to be in sync with the darkness at night. And whenever we move away from that, we're disrupting our circadian rhythm. And when that's disrupted, that's when health declines. There's been a lot of studies on shift workers, and there are things that even shift workers can do with mitigating, disrupting the circadian rhythm. It just depends on, what their shift work is. But for people, another thing you can do course, this doesn't help horses. If you're working in barns at night, you can get blue blocking glasses.
Okay.
So,
Blue blocking glasses. Interesting. Tell us
yeah.
about it.
So, blue light blocking glasses, there's a lot of different companies that make them. You just have to make sure that they test them. So, you can't go to Walmart and get a pair of blue blocking readers.
Okay.
They have to be like the daytime blue blocking glasses are yellow lenses. The nighttime blue blocking glasses are red lenses. And
Okay.
you can also get orange lenses for like in the morning or in the evening if you still have a couple hours before you want to start winding down for bed. The light that comes through our eyes. So I mentioned before, we have a nucleus that goes from our eye to our hypothalamus, and that basically sets our circadian clock, the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And we also have aromatic amino acids. We have non-visual photoreceptors in our eyes, but also all over our body, all over our skin. So that's why sunglasses are not good, because your eyes and your skin need to be on the same circadian rhythm.
Right.
And
Right. No, this makes perfect sense. And this brings me back to something else I wanted to highlight with your point about circadian rhythms. I.e., you need your proper sleep cycles, i.e., you need darkness, whether you're a horse or whether you're a human, or the human that you're serving, that let's say we're giving advice to people to what to do when they can go home. Cerebral spinal fluid, I just want to draw people's attention to this. It's if you sleep well at night, it's like a dishwasher for your brain. It will flush waste material out of your brain, and they can now look at this on scans. It's not. It's all quite recent. Type it into Google. It's all over. It's well researched. It's nothing woo woo.
it's the glymphatics.
Right. So National Institute of Health, has got a whole thing on it now, but the role of age, sleep, and cerebral spinal fluid, melatonin, plaques in the brain, needing to, flush those things out, that one can't do that if one's not in a proper circadian rhythm. It's the
Right.
cerebral spinal fluid that's doing that. That cerebral spinal fluid has to be, as you say, positively structured and charged. And the mitochondria in there has to be optimal. But we can do all of that by kind of changing our lighting and being outside more.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that cleaning that our cerebral spinal fluid does for our brain at night is our cerebral spinal fluid is on a circadian rhythm, and it relies on melatonin to be released. And melatonin is not only made in our pineal gland, it's also made in our mitochondria.
Okay.
And it's being made all day long. And then it's the darkness at night that tells it to release.
Got it.
And if we don't have that darkness at night, the melatonin does not release. Therefore, the cerebral spinal fluid doesn't do its job of cleaning out the brain. The lymphatic system gets sluggish. It's the same with eating at night. At night, our body starts to shut down so it can go into all the healing and repair that it needs to do when we sleep. That's what sleep is for us. And if we eat past dark, that's when people tend to get a lot of GI problems, because their body is trying to shut down, and the digestion actually gets slower at night.
Right.
So-
I'm also something else that just occurred to me. Some of us, if you do get your circadian rhythm broken at night and you go for a daytime nap, that can also help reset this. I was just looking at something from Johns Hopkins Medical Institute, them saying that yes, you can get this cerebral spinal fluid flush of your brain thing happening with a sort of 30 to 90 minute nap in the middle of the day. But I do believe that it's still, so we should do that, by the way. So go nap, everybody, now. Pull over and go have a nap. But it's the nighttime sleep that's the big one, though, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And there are things that we can do that are easy. So, and the complaint I hear is from parents who have kids, their kids go to bed and that's when they get their little me time or whatever. And most people's wind down time nowadays is scrolling on their phone, scrolling on their computer, or watching TV.
Yeah.
And the thing that we haven't talked about, we talked about the lights, but we didn't talk about the lights on the screens and the all these tech devices, TVs, computers, phones are backlit with this intense blue light.
Mm.
And
Mm.
that's going to disrupt your circadian rhythm. And it also has a flicker, and it's also can cause eye damage. People get afraid of the sun for eye diseases, but it's not the sun. It's the tech screens and the lights on at night. And there's a software program called Iris Tech that you can download on your computer, and it not only gets rid of the flicker, but it changes color based on what time of day it is. So at night, the computer looks red. So like right now, mine's kind of an ambery color. And then your cell phones, I have mine where I'm having a bad tech day, but I can put mine, I don't know if you can see.
Oh, yeah, you're holding it up. Yeah, her cell phone is looking pretty red. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and this is what I do once it starts to get dark.
Okay.
But I also wear glasses that block the blue. And
Okay.
when I first started learning this, it just made so much sense to me because of my history in the cranial world. But the first thing I did was I bought some red blue blocking glasses, and I put those on at night. Because I sat down, watched TV, and I put on those blue blocking glasses. And like within an hour, I was ready to go to bed. 30 minutes, maybe. I was tired and I slept. And that morning, I woke up when the sun came up and I was like completely rested. I wasn't tired. I didn't have to drag my ass out of bed and go drink coffee. I was just up and I felt good. And the second thing I incorporated was getting outside to watch the sun rise. And those two things have been life-changing for me, and they're easy to do.
Do you
It's
do that
great.
even in winter? When
Yeah.
rising very, sorry, even in summer when the sun is rising very early?
Yep.
Do you then go back to bed?
Nope.
Okay. So that means you have to
Kinda
make sure that you got to sleep. Because if you go to, in midsummer, if you go to sleep at sunset, that could be, where I live, that's 10 o'clock at night. And you got up with the dawn, that's 4 a.m.
yeah.
That's a short.
That's the thing. When you live, the further away you get from the equator, the more unstable your light environment is. So you just have to mitigate those things. I'm a little closer to the equator, so it's a little more stable, but I do try to at least be out when UVA is rising. And UVA is all year round, no matter where you are on the planet. The light that you don't get in the more northern latitudes is UVB.
What is UVB?
UVB is the light that basically, when it touches our skin, it tells the cholesterol in our skin to make vitamin D. It's not really a vitamin, it's a hormone. But UVB is what makes D, and it's also what builds the microbiome in our gut.
So if we live in the more northerly latitudes, what do we do to mitigate?
Well, you don't need if you're an uncoupled haplotype, you don't really need
If you're a what?
a haplotype. So everybody's either a coupled haplotype or an uncoupled haplotype.
Very personal thing to say.
I know. Uncoupled haplotypes are basically people who come from more northern latitudes.
What does that
Coupled,
mean? Yeah.
it's
What's
just
a
how
hap-
your mitochondria make energy.
Okay.
So a coupled haplotype would be someone from an equatorial country. They've got more melanin in their skin, and their mitochondria needs more UV light to make energy than ours does.
Okay.
Uh, like, look at some of the strongest people on the planet are Sherpas. They're not too far from the equator, and they live in high elevations. So they're getting a lot of UV and a lot of magnetism. So they're very strong people. And when you're uncoupled, that just means you're from a more northern latitude.
Mhm.
Uncoupled haplotypes use UV and cold. So in the wintertime,
Interesting.
your vitamin D that you make in the summertime, if you're getting sun on your skin without sun on bare skin with no lotions or anything, and you're building your vitamin D, it stores in your body for the winter. So you get up to a certain amount and then you store it. But you also can make they're finding that there's some new studies that they're finding that cold exposure helps your body with the vitamin D as well. It I don't know if it helps your body make it or if it helps your body store it better, but in the winter time, we don't really if you're from a more northern latitude, you don't need to mitigate UVB, although some people do get those lights. You can get a Spurdy lamp or an EMR tech. Those are lights that people get that have the different spectrums in them. And some people do use those in the winter, but you don't really have to because you want to think what is natural for your mitochondria, what's natural for where you're from and where you currently live. And that would be maybe getting more sleep in the winter and doing more cold exposure.
Right. I'm just reading here, good health and immune function can be at risk in winter. However, the cold exposure that coincides with the nadir, the lowest point in seasonal blood serum, vitamin D, might compensate by stimulating mitochondrial production of ultraviolet light inside the cell, thus activating vitamin D production inside brown fat and other cells. This is what cold exposure can do. Interesting. So that's sort of
Yeah. Cold exposure tells your mitochondria to produce UV light, which is heat.
I see. To warm up. Right. Got it.
Yeah.
Also fills you with endorphins when you do.
It can release some endorphins, yeah. And you have to be careful with cold exposure. I mean, I don't agree with the whole Huberman Lab 47 degrees or at 11 minutes a week because everybody's different. Everybody's N equals 1 is different. So for some people, that would put you in a complete cortisol stress.
Okay.
Technically, anything that's below our body temperature is considered cold exposure. So you could, if it's 60 degrees, you could take a walk outside for an hour and that would be cold exposure.
Not if you're wearing an Arctic fleece, right? I mean, how would you get
Yeah.
that cold?
Yeah.
What would you wear at 60 degrees to get cold exposure?
I would probably, I mean, I take walks when it's 35, 40, and I'll wear a pair of shorts and a sweatshirt and tennis shoes.
And how long will that walk be? By the way, 35, 40, she means Fahrenheit. So she's
Fahrenheit,
talking
yeah.
jolly chilly if you're a Celsius person.
Yeah,
That's just about like 2 or 3 degrees
yeah.
Celsius. Yeah.
But I'm cold adapted, so, and I would need at least 40 minutes of that to get a true cold
You do
thermogenesis.
that in a howling wind with horizontal sleet?
So I'm not that crazy.
Well, because again, just so listeners understand, I'm talking to you from winter in Germany. You're talking from winter in Texas, which is a
Yeah,
Mediterranean winter. It's not that you can't get very cold in Texas, but it blows in and it blows out and it doesn't last very long. The
yeah,
cold here, it's different. So we're in the sort of North Atlantic weather systems, mid-continental. So it can get
yeah.
damn cold and
It's
but
cold.
nasty,
Yeah,
like, howling wind, rain that'll cut through you like a knife. Should
yeah.
I go out in my t-shirt and shorts in that?
No, I wouldn't. You
Then
don't
how am I going to get my
need,
cold exposure?
you
I
don't
mean, by the way,
need
I
that.
am outside in that all day.
I mean, yeah, you're
I
going
definitely
out in
feel
that all,
cold.
and
You
you're
can-
cold,
yeah,
and it's, and that's okay. I mean, it's okay to be cold. That's what I'm saying.
yeah,
It's
it is.
good for your mitochondria. You can go out in that and bundle up, but you're still getting cold, right?
Exactly. Well, of course, even like today, I was on horseback and the wind was doing its thing. And, just the front of your face is getting a proper scrape.
Yeah.
It's, the ice thing is just going all
Yeah.
across your.
And that, yeah, that's the best place to get cold is your face.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
your
Why?
forehead.
Why is that?
It's has to do, I don't remember exactly. It has to do with what's being stimulated with the cold on your forehead.
Prefrontal cortex chilling or something?
That brain
This is
brain freeze.
literally cooling you down.
I think because that triggers some receptors that help your mitochondria produce the light. So some people who can't do cold exposure, they do face dunks in ice.
Oh, interesting. So I just looked it up, of course. Cold water therapy, skin health promotes collagen production, apparently counteracting stress factors so actually it's good for your wrinkles and your skin firmness, cold water immersion, but also lymphatic drainage. So I guess that's what getting rid of inflammation. So, okay.
Yeah, it also it helps your bulk water structure.
I see.
That's another thing that cold.
But here's the question. So you don't agree with the Huberman Labs stuff of these? Are you talking about ice baths there? Are you talking about like the
Yeah,
Wim Hof stuff?
yeah,
So some people, we know people who are great ice bath evangelists, but they would put their hand on their heart and say, Rupert, I feel so much better and I'm so much healthier and I'm so much stronger with my ice baths. And then I know other people who'll hold up a crucifix and say, get away from me with your satanic ice bath. Who's
yeah.
right?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Or is everybody right? Because it depends
Everybody's,
on your metabolism.
yeah, everybody's N equals 1 is different. Everybody's mitochondrial health is in a different place.
Okay.
And and you
How do
can,
you know that? How do you know if an ice bath is good for you or not? Because you just have to try and see what your reaction is.
yeah, if it's too stressful, don't do it.
Okay. So now what if your
Start
ice
with
bath
something easy.
coach is like, no, you can do it. No, no, no. Should you do it?
I would get a different ice bath coach
Okay.
because I don't think, I mean, I'm looking at mitochondrial function.
Mm.
If there's somebody who's encouraging you and you really want to do it, yeah, but is dipping down and getting up within 1 minute, you know, beneficial? I don't think it's probably beneficial to your willpower. You know, what you learn that you can handle, which is huge. Our emotions are huge around that. And that has a lot that can have a big effect on our health and our cellular health. But if you want to do cold thermogenesis that improves mitochondrial function, you have to have a longer exposure, but the temperature depends on your N=1. It depends on your mitochondrial health. If you have autoimmune disease and you've got some other health problems because of that, I wouldn't go jump in an ice bath. I would start really slow.
Yeah.
Because what you don't want is your cortisol to spike. Our cortisol is spikes in the morning to get us up. That's why going outside and getting the sun is good, because it helps temper the cortisol, and it helps your body go, okay, we're up. Now other things need to take over. But if your cortisol is always spiked, then you're going to get chronic inflammation. And if you're forcing
Even though
yourself,
cortisol brings down inflammation, it's one of its jobs, right? Is to bring down inflammation.
yeah,
So,
but it's not supposed to be there all the time.
got it. Too much medicine.
Yeah, too much. Yeah. So if you're doing ice baths and it's too much cortisol, then you need to raise the temperature or do it a different way.
One of the things which I find difficult about an ice bath is that you go in there and you don't move. And for me, when I get that kind of shock to the system, my body automatically wants to move. So, for example, if I were to go into the cold ocean or a cold river, I would be able to splash, move, go, jump around,
Yeah.
do all that sort of thing, which brings my cortisol down, of course.
Yeah.
There's something to me which is cortisol-y, stressy about feeling confined in that cold exposure suffering state. But yet I know other people who love it.
Oh, yeah.
So it
Yeah.
seems to be a real temperament thing.
Yeah. And you get addicted to it. We get addicted to the cold. And once you start using the sun more, you get addicted. We're meant to become addicted to the sun.
Mm.
And we also get addicted to the cold. And addicted, I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just our body seeks that because it's healthy for us.
Yeah.
But yeah, the cold, I've actually hurt my back worse doing ice baths. And I've learned that it was because it was too cold and I was in a confined state. So I was just sitting there, like frozen. So sometimes in the winter, I'll get in my pool where I can move around.
How long will you do that for?
It depends on how cold it is, but usually around 20 minutes.
Okay. So I guess back to I'm a therapeutic or equine-assisted person. It's winter. Do I need to make sure I've got some time where I pull the rugs off the horses and let their body temperatures drop, let them get full vitamin D exposure to the sun before I put the blankets back on for the rest of the day? It's interesting. I grew up doing a lot of hunting, fox hunting, whatever. Please don't kill me. I gave it up, but I still go out now with the artificial type of hounds where we don't actually hassle a live animal anymore. But of course that's done in the winter and often on horses that are clipped because they're being super athletic while they're out there. You don't want them overheating and the sweat
Yeah.
balling up and chafing them and blah, blah. So they're partially shaved or fully shaved on the body and they're out 3 to 6 hours like that working in the winter in all weathers, and they love it and they seem to do it till they're about 30 years old and come back in happy. And then of course you rug them up at night, particularly if they're clipped. Obviously they don't have the winter coat. My horses now, the ones I'm not hunting them because I'm not in an area where I do that, but I let them have a winter coat, but I don't want too much winter coat because again, I'm doing quite a lot of athletic work. I don't want them sweating too much in the winter, and they live outside anyway. So I do rug them, but as much as possible, I do try to pull the rugs off. Now, I was pulling the rugs off as much as possible in the daytime, just to let them roll, get muddy, get, the itches out, just because they like it. But you are now saying that, or suggesting, or are you, that there could be a more mitochondrial based, liquid intelligence based structure of the intelligent water in the body based need for that exposure, particularly in the short sun days of winter, to just make sure that they get it on their skin for their
Yes.
optimal mitochondrial health. Okay,
Yep.
that's interesting.
Pull the rugs off in the winter and give them. Think of it as light therapy. Give them some
Mm,
light therapy. I mean, look at what's become so popular right now is red light therapy.
mm,
But red light comes from the sun. You can just go out in the sun. And
right.
if you're afraid of the UV, if you just go out in the morning and in the evening, it's pure red and infrared. There is no UV. UV UV comes out, once the sun starts rising. And the only UV that has actually been shown to be damaging is UVB. And with the studies that they did on that, they did it in isolation. They isolated the UVB. They didn't mix it with the red and infrared from the sun. But anyway, red light, getting out in the sun is the same as doing red light therapy.
Okay.
And I
So
actually have a little
get out of
story.
that arena.
Yep, get out as much as you can. I have a dog that's, well, gosh, she's probably 19 now.
Mm,
And she has good eyesight, good hearing, and she started to get really itchy, like scratching all the time.
hmm
And this was about the time that I started my whole quantum shift with my lifestyle. And I was going outside every morning, and my dog would come with me. We'd go out, I'd have my coffee outside, and she would come out and sit with me 'cause she's with me everywhere. And after about a week, she completely stopped scratching.
Now,
And
go ahead. Sorry, then I've got a thought.
so I firmly believe it was the healing, light from the sun.
Okay, now you did earlier on, about an hour ago, you mentioned in summer not using a fly sheet or a fly mask. I've got a couple of horses which, if I do that, the flies will eat them alive, literally tear their flesh. And I can't not put a fly sheet on those horses. And then the same for the fly mask, they'll just suffer so
Yeah.
terribly, like really suffer. Other horses seem to sail through it. What do I do in that situation? And
Yeah.
the other question is, can you get the same beneficial effects from moonlight?
No.
So
No.
if I pull the rug off at night in the summer, for example,
No,
and
it
it's
has to
they're
be.
not getting reflected nice UV light for their
No.
mitochondria. So how do I help that horse out? Because everyone's
I
sort of like this.
Yeah, my horse had an eye problem, so I fly masked my horse. I was actually have a friend who was talking to somebody who makes fly masks, and they were were going to test them to see if they could make some that don't filter out the UV, because that's some of the beneficial light that they need. You could leave it off in the morning before the flies get bad. Just
Mm,
put it on later. Give them breaks. That's what I tell
mhm.
people. If you
Okay.
can,
Yeah.
I know people are busy, but if you can give them breaks, give them a couple hours of that morning sun and that evening sun when the flies are not
Yeah.
so bad.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking about, horses that I have to put on far pastures and might have to ignore for a few days, and they're happy, they're roaming about there, but I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave that fly sheet on and that fly mask on, or
Yeah,
I'll
if
just
they're
there's chunks of them missing, from the flies.
yeah, I mean, you have to yeah, you have to use your the things I wonder is what is it about that horse that's attracting flies?
Mm,
Mm, it's in one of my classes, they were talking about how people who have gotten bitten by sharks or even people who get bitten by mosquitoes are actually leaking too much biophotons. So the the biophotons that we produce, the light that we produce, we hold on to that light, and that creates energy in our system. But when we're sick or compromised, that we're not able to hold on to that light. So it starts to fly off of us. And they can actually see that in certain imaging. There's actually a whole science behind, there's a group of biofield scientists who are measuring our biofields. And so I wonder about horses because I had one that, my herd of 5, one of them got completely eaten alive by bugs, but the other one's not so much.
mm,
And he was a horse that he came from the Primeran farm, so he probably, didn't have a good, development in utero, I would think. Like, his whole system was just weaker.
mm,
Um, so I wonder about horses that how some horses or even things like EPM, that protozoa
mm,
that can cause the neurological problems. You can have a herd of 20 horses in a field, and only one of them will get, um, affected by that.
mm,
So, when I see that, it's like, yeah, you wanna keep them comfortable, and you want them to not get eaten up because it's miserable for them. And then what do you how do you give them the light that they need
mm.
to optimize their mitochondrial function? And why are those things getting attracted to them more?
Mm.
And
It's
so
a really interesting question. We've asked ourselves this. This particular two horses in question, they're Lusitanos. One was bred in Portugal, one was bred in North Carolina. I kept them in Texas. They had no problem there. And it's buggy in Texas, as you know. You live in
yeah,
Texas in the summertime. I moved here to Germany, which is a cooler climate. I mean, it gets hot in the summer, but nothing like as hot and not for as long. But high bug activity, different types of bug. Brought 7 horses. 2 suffered, 2 did not. But the suffering only showed up after about 4 years.
hmm,
They were grand, and then they sort of weren't. And obviously, like all horse owners, I've tried this and I've tried that.
yeah.
But I find that the main thing is just to make sure that, I keep them covered enough.
Yeah, and that timing would make sense if it's some kind of mitochondrial dysfunction. I think I mentioned earlier, it they are dysfunctional. They can function I can never say the sentence correctly. Mitochondria will not show any signs the body will not show any signs of dysfunction until the mitochondria is operating at a
Got it.
70% deficit. It's like the electric transport chain that keeps that energy production gets doesn't function right, and when that slows down, cellular function declines. So it takes time. So it could be
Yes.
something about their environment
Yes, absolutely. One of the things I'm going to be looking at is selenium. As you know, that's a whole tricky area with horses because,
Yeah.
too much or too little, blah, blah, blah. But I think there might be some deficiency there in our area. But it's interesting. I'm just going to dive down the rabbit hole now of when summer comes around again, of looking at how can I boost their mitochondrial health? And I'm just going to be very interested to see, you know, if
Yeah,
I can
because
that perspective.
they make vitamin D as well, but it's a little different. It comes onto their fur and in their skin, and then they release a serum, and then they lick it. They groom each other. One of the things they're
Okay.
doing is they're getting vitamin D.
Is that so?
Yeah, and dogs will lick, and cats will lick, get the vitamin D that they produced.
I
So
see.
that's another reason why they need that direct sunlight.
And the chance to groom each other,
Yeah. Yep.
even when they pull each other's manes out. Really annoying.
Yeah.
It's like, guys, why do you have to do that?
Yeah. Mutual grooming that's one thing that is not very well known, is that's one way they get their vitamin D.
Is that so? Okay. And what's really interesting, both those horses really go for the mutual grooming. And
Yeah.
I
And
always
that's
encourage
interesting.
it. I never discourage it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. They're probably lacking. And that's the thing, is the quantum health is studied in the human world. It's not part of centralized mainstream medicine. Like if you
Mhm.
go to your primary care physician and you complain about being electrosensitive because you're suffering from a mitochondrial dysfunction, I don't think they'll know what to do with that.
No, it's so interesting, isn't it? That, yeah, there's a big disconnect between, say, the Mitochondrial Institute at University of California, which is huge, which is one of the first things to get behind us, and an average internal medicine doctor who you would think would be exposed to all that knowledge and not at all, like not neuroscience either. Um,
Yeah, it's not like they get, like, even eye doctors, and I follow a woman who's a quantum eye doctor, and it's not like doctors get a text message every time there's a new study that comes out. It has to be, and they're all overworked
right.
anyway,
They have to
you know?
be nerds that want to nerd out on that stuff.
Yeah, or yeah, they have to really, and the same with our animals. There's really not much there. I think there's a woman in the UK, I can't remember her name right now, but she's starting to incorporate more quantum health in large animals, and
Well, that was my next question is where are the quantum vets? And I'm going to hop on Google in a minute. I also Googled while you were talking about photon loss.
bioscience.
Yeah, I was like losing the light when you're sick. It's like, is that a thing? And I looked it up just now, listeners. It's totally a thing. I found just a bazillion articles from various medical journals. And again, Johns Hopkins popped up and it just boom, 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 boom. So these things are being well studied. These are not just fringe issues. However, let's talk about something which sounds like a fringe issue. We're approaching the 2 hour mark. There's going to be more I'm going to want to ask, but I think we will have to come back again just because um, our brains will be a bit blown. You mentioned earlier something about trying to ground, maybe using a grounding sheet to help mitigate some of the negative effects of being bombarded by too much of these other electromagnetic fields, but that some of them can malfunction and actually make you charge something called dirty electricity. What's
Mhm.
dirty electricity when it's at home?
Dirty electricity, not even a building biologist will say it's
A
a very good.
building biologist. So
Yeah.
a biologist who comes in and sort of assesses your building, your home environment or your office environment. Or,
Yes.
okay,
They assess it for the different
building
frequencies.
biologist. Interesting. Okay.
And one of the things they can test for is dirty electricity.
All right.
Dirty electricity is it's complicated, but it's basically if there's a faulty wire, if your wires are not coated with can't remember what it is. Anything that's got a dual motor, like an air conditioning or a pool pump or refrigerator, these things can emit dirty electricity. And you can actually get a filter. They say not to get the plug-in filters for your plugs because that could scatter the dirty electricity more. That you want to get a whole house filter for your breaker box. They are expensive, but then, even then, you have to make sure you're not getting dirty electricity from the power grid coming to your house. So
You make sure of that.
get it tested by a building biologist. They can test that. And all I did, I Googled building biologist near me, and I found somebody, and she came out and tested everything. And so the
Like
thing,
Geiger counters or what?
yeah, these little different meters that measure like radio frequencies and microwaves, uh, radiation from Wi-Fi. It's called
Okay,
an
go ahead. Sorry.
so when we ground on the earth, we're gathering electrons. You can also ground by touching trees. And I'm testing the grounding by touching horses, even if you have shoes on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing my own little case study on that. And I have found that sometimes I can ground, or sometimes I'm grounded just by touching them, even if I have shoes on, and sometimes I'm not. And that could be how well hydrated I am. But so basically that gives us electrons, and our mitochondria need electrons. And if we don't have enough electrons, our body tries to find them wherever we can get them. It's like a mother holding her sick baby. She's giving her baby electrons by doing that. We can steal electrons from other people if we're not functioning optimally, or we can get our electrons stolen. And
Sounds like
so,
vampires.
yeah. I mean, it's like, have you been around somebody and then was exhausted afterwards?
How are they stealing my electrons?
Their mitochondria sense that. And we have what's called a biofield. And that's a real thing too. And it's about 3 feet off our body from our
Right.
skin,
This is
about
well
3 feet.
studied. Yeah.
Yeah. And that can grab, just
Would that be somebody who's not producing enough electrons and they're like just trying to get it from wherever they can?
yeah, people who never get electrons, which a
Like,
lot of us are electron deficient. If we're living an indoor
are
life.
energy vampires people who live electron deficient lives?
Yeah. Don't even realize it.
Interesting.
If you're
Someone less
circadian.
likely to be an energy vampire if they live their life outside.
Yep.
Interesting. So energy
And
vampirism is a thing.
yep. And if your circadian rhythm is off, you're not getting the electrons you need. So you're going to be constantly trying to steal them from everywhere. But going outside and grounding is a great way to get them. And then, so now there's these grounding devices that we can use, like grounding sheets that you mentioned earlier. But if you're plugging the sheet into the wall, because they'll plug into the ground of your electricity. If you plug it into the wall and you have dirty electricity, that dirty electricity is looking for a place to ground, and it's going to ground right on you on the grounding sheet. So if you have a grounding sheet, don't plug it into the wall. Get one of those little stakes you can plug into the earth outside, and a little cord you can run through your window. And make sure you don't have any cables buried around where you put the stake, because the same thing can happen. So the best place would be by a tree, if you have that.
Okay, I'm just checking again for listeners. The woo-woo factor. Is dirty electricity real? Turns out it is. I'm looking at an article in Nature, which is obviously one of the big scientific journals. It says the term dirty electricity refers to the electromagnetic energy flowing along a conductor that deviates from a pure 50 to 60 hertz sine wave. What we think of as that woo wave that goes like that. Not woo-woo, but I made that noise to denote that my finger making this nice harmonious wave, and has both harmonic and transient properties. Okay, so basically power surges, erratic spikes in energy, stuff that isn't working properly. As you said, perhaps sometimes with microwaves and things, although I do use microwaves a lot. Hey, that's very convenient.
I do too. I use a microwave and I just don't stand by it.
Right.
We tend to stand in front and watch the seconds count down. So I purposefully like move away and go do something else because standing in front of them, you're just getting that.
Yeah, getting cooked.
Yeah.
You know, my way of grounding, what I do, of course, is I spend as much time outside as I can with my feet on the ground. Or sometimes, if the weather is conducive, my whole body, I will starfish on any given piece of grass I can find. And I'll do it in winter on a ground sheet. And I do that with the kids that come to us from some of the schools that sent, because it's like, they're getting no chance. And the other thing which I'll do a lot is take my shoes off, even in winter. And I'll say, let's get muddy. It's okay. We won't die, because we're also going to dry our feet off soon and put nice woolly socks on again. But why don't we? And it's so interesting how this seems to bring instant joy. But I'm understanding it now from a mitochondrial light intelligent liquid point of view now, which is very interesting. So of course, in Horseboy Method, one of the best things we can ever do is camps. Where we see the biggest changes happen in kids and families is when we go away and we camp. We take the horses, we camp. It's like the journey we did in Mongolia, but not as difficult. But it's quite basic, and people are sleeping on the ground and walking around on the ground and being outside in nature all day. And we tend to see the charm is if it's a 3-night camp, that third night, the waking up after that third night seems to bring a massive metabolic and brain change. This has been beginning to give me insights into why. So again, if I'm an equine-assisted practitioner, what am I learning here? I'm learning that if I pay attention to mitochondria, I might find good solutions for my horses. I might find good solutions for my clients. I might find good solutions for myself. And the further I go into this, what makes good mitochondria? Well, it seems nature does. Light, natural light. Back to getting a bit cold sometimes, being outside. Back to what Temple Grandin told me, go outside, go outside, go outside, let them move. Isn't it interesting how we can break down all of these things that really just tell us, lads, your environment is out there on the planet, not in here in front of this screen. Don't know how many times I've got to tell you, but you're an organism. You need a habitat. It ain't here. It's not in this tank. It's out there. And feeling a bit shit, it's because you're a zoo animal. Get out there into your habitat. But if we're raised in the zoo habitats, we don't know this, do we?
No, we don't. And we're not taught this. And
No.
we are meant to be grounded 24 hours a day.
Right.
And how often are we getting that?
The best I've ever felt is on long journeys in nature, camping, living with bushmen, arse on the ground.
Yeah. I used to go on wild camping trips, and looking back, I always remember it was really hard to integrate back into the society. Yeah. And the other thing that grounding does, I didn't mention, is our blood cells. Our blood cells travel, through our body in a vortex shape, and the cells actually have that negative charge. So that means they push against each other. And if we don't get grounding, we don't get that charge. the blood cells start to clump together, and they actually call it stacking. So the cells start to stack. And there's been some studies on this where they took someone, they drew blood, looked at it through a microscope, took them out to ground. And the one study that I recently read, she was out there 10 minutes, bare feet. It was on a beach. So you're going to get more when you're at the ocean. I came back and they drew blood, looked at her blood cells and they had that nice charge. They were completely different.
Yeah. As always, the answers to the complicated questions seem to be quite simple.
Yes.
And
Nature doesn't lie.
isn't it interesting how we'd also rather go to a store and spend money on a product than just go outside and take our shoes off? It's
I
we don't
know,
even
that's the
compare.
thing. We've got all these products now when we can just go outside. We've got the red light. Well, we can just go outside. We've got the grounding stuff, or you can just go outside. And I think that's why kids do so well with horses, especially if they're living an indoor lifestyle, because they're getting the grounding, they're touching the animal, they're getting the electrons, they're getting the different rays of sunlight. So there's science behind all of this. And I encourage people to read it. Like if you're worried about eye diseases or skin cancers, read the studies that are out there. It's the indoor life that's causing these problems. It's the artificial light. We've been part of nature, how long have humans been around? And a lot of these diseases.
Female, if it's hominids that are not sapiens sapiens, it goes into the millions. Yeah.
Yeah, millions. Yeah, because it's
Our species is, they think 300,000, but we're just the bottom end of a long chain of other ones. Yeah.
mammals. How long have we been mammals, I should say? Because
Since I think the Jurassic, the first mammals appear, as far as I know.
actually, didn't we?
Or is it even Triassic?
So as long as there's been mammals, we've had mitochondria,
Okay.
and our mitochondria is designed to.
225 million years. And it is the late Triassic, even before the Jurassic. Wow.
Yeah, and I've
She
actually
like things.
I've seen graphs of health decline that matched lighting environment, matched the increase in Wi-Fi and all that. Like my phone, I don't have the Wi-Fi on my phone, and I turned some little thing off so it won't attach to 5G towers, and I don't use Bluetooth because that's the other thing that's even like the worst of all of them. Like those
Oh, it is?
those Bluetooth earbuds. Don't use them.
Okay. Why not?
Get the tube ones, because Bluetooth is another electromagnetic field, and there's been studies on that where it's degrading the melanin in your ear, and things like tinnitus and all kinds of stuff they're finding linked to those Bluetooth earbuds.
What if you got Bluetooth in you're listening to, you're mucking out you're dancing, or you're mucking out your stalls to a Bluetooth speaker off your phone?
I would hardwire it. I know I'm taking all the fun away, especially if you like tech gadgets.
How would you hardwire it? You'd plug a speaker into the phone.
Yeah, you can do like an auxiliary.
Mm-hmm.
I've got an auxiliary cord, and that's what I plug my phone into my car,
Okay.
so I don't use Bluetooth. And that made a big difference in how I felt because I drive a lot.
Interesting.
And I always crack a window to let the light come in. Because that's the other thing we didn't talk about is windows
Okay.
in a in a because they're energy efficient, they're blocking out all the red light. But if you just crack it a little bit, it's like imagine the light is an ocean outside and you crack a little bit, that water's gonna come in and fill the room. That's what the outdoor light will do.
Okay. So
So
you need ventilation, not just for oxygen, you need it for light.
yeah.
Okay.
And there's a company, I think it's called Tech Wellness. They sell those earpods that are attached with a tube to your phone, so you're not using the Bluetooth.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah, any smart device, I've gone back to Ethernet and hardwiring things.
Yeah. It's tricky because, we all live on our phones. We have to live on our phones. I'm
Mm,
checking for the next appointment, when I'm out there. It's handy that I can be connected so I can do my emails and make a business call from the saddle. It's good
yep.
on that side. But
Yeah, just don't keep your phone on your body
okay. In a
because you're
pocket. I mean, where
mhm.
can I keep it if it's not on my body?
Well, you know what you can do is put it in airplane mode when you're not using it.
Hmm.
And that at least will prevent you from getting that radiation from the phone.
But so for example, if you're a parent, you've got young kids, you've got to be on call, you don't have the luxury of switching off anymore. If someone gives you a call about your kids, you've got to be there to take it, work calls, blah, blah, blah. That phone is got to be there. You're moving around. Where can you have it
You can buy these pockets that you can put your phone in that shield. They're and I think Tech Wellness has them, but they're electromagnetic field shielders. Like if you Google that, those will
uh,
come up like
if you
Faraday.
put tin foil
Faraday.
in your pocket, would that help?
I don't know. You could try it.
Yeah.
Those they make something called a Faraday bag. You
Hmm.
can actually get a, net put over your bed, but I wouldn't do that because that's gonna block out the Earth's natural rhythms as well. But
Hmm.
you can you can buy little phone holders that do protect you. Because even in the phone pamphlet, it says not to hold them up to your ear.
Yeah.
That can cause, brain cancers, and so
Yes.
you're not supposed to put them anywhere on your body.
Yeah. But it's very, very hard not to put them in a pocket when you're riding, when you're working, so even if it's in a pocket, let's say it's in a jacket pocket, separated by 3 layers of material from your body. Does that help?
I I would probably still either put some block in there, put one of those fabrics, silver, I think blocks
Hmm.
it, or buy something to
Hmm.
put it in that blocks all that.
Okay.
'Cause you don't want that exposure on yourself
Hmm.
and then transferring to your horse. And everybody rides with their cell phone. I used to ride with mine, and my riding pants had a special little cell phone.
Yeah.
But when my body started falling apart, that's when I got serious about making these changes.
Okay.
And my body and my brain. I was afraid I was getting dementia. It was
Okay.
so bad. I still get little bouts of it, but a lot of things have changed. Even my
How
hair has grown back.
do you feel that there's been a big change in you in, say, the last 24 months?
Yeah.
It's interesting that you say that, Shay, because I'm used to you speaking very articulately, but very slowly. And I always just thought, oh, that's because she's just very deep and has a lot to say. And, there is obviously that is true. But this is the first conversation that I've had with you that has been a more natural pace. Interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah, you're faster than you were on our last interaction. 2 interactions, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I get shy and get a little,
Now I'm going to make you close up because I said that.
I know. I seriously thought I was developing, and I probably was getting some dementia. And it coincided with a, a few things that brought me inside more. I was on the computer more.
Mhm,
We had the stronger Wi-Fi. My circadian rhythm was messed up.
mhm.
But even my hair, I was losing a lot of hair and it's grown back.
Interesting.
Yeah, and they say that's one of the first signs of improvement in your health is when your hair starts to grow back.
Mitochondrial
Mhm.
j- joy expressing itself through the hair.
Yep.
All right. Well, I think let's wrap it up here for now. I think that we've definitely drawn people's attention to the importance of mitochondria for humans and horses. We've drawn people's attention to why natural environments, as much as possible, including lighting and so on, are helpful in this. We've gone a little bit down the rabbit hole of the difficulties of our modern age with 5G electronic devices everywhere, but things that we can do to mitigate this, and also the types of lighting and so on. I really would encourage listeners, go check out Shea Stewart. We have all of her websites in at, you know, on the written bit. But Shea, could you also just, for those readers who like to hear it, can you just tell us how they can get in touch with you and how they can consult with you?
Probably through my website, which is equinebalance.net, and or my probably through there. I have a Facebook page, Equine
We-
Balance.
Okay, Equine Balance, equinebalance.net, or the Facebook page, Equine Balance. There's good shit on that Facebook page. I've read some amazing things. What I didn't get to this time was something in your last post, which is, do humans actually photosynthesize? Because
Oh, yeah. Yep,
so just quickly, it sounds rather like we do with this light thing. As the closing thought, how do humans photosynthesize?
well, we take light and turn that light into energy.
Mm,
So
yeah,
that's how humans photosynthesize.
it's not something you think about us doing, is it?
No,
When you say you're vegetating, it's like, yes, I'm busy photosynthesizing over here, actually.
yeah, and some of it is through the melanin in our skin absorbs frequencies of light and then liberates that into electrons, and that's photosynthesis.
Brilliant. It's a shame
Now
that we're not producing oxygen as we do it. Wouldn't that be nice for the planet? Or are we?
we are our mitochondria does. Our mitochondria does a lot. They're
But
very
are we shoving that oxygen back out into the world like a tree does? Not.
no,
No, sadly.
no,
Sadly for
we
the trees. No, but no, not for the trees, because we're giving them carbon dioxide. They love
yeah,
that.
and
Yeah,
they
yeah,
need that.
they do.
Yeah, they need that.
I hope they're grateful. Oi, it's been a treat. Would you come on again?
I would love to. People are interested in this stuff. I could talk about it all day. I
Uh,
know.
yeah, and full disclosure, readers, Shay and I will likely be doing, we did it last year, at least an online series of little seminars together. Um, I'd love to do one physically, but you're 8 bazillion miles away. And whenever I'm in Texas, it's like zoom through.
Yeah.
But it would be great to do maybe a retreat at some point with no 5G.
Uh,
Maybe we should talk about that. rebooting our mitochondria. That would be a cool retreat, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we should talk about that. Okay, listeners, you heard it here. Get on the waiting list for Shea, come and sort out your mitochondria. Photosynthesizing.
We'll reconnect to nature and know why. Now we'll actually know what it's doing and why it's so important. I think that's my main message, is to get it out there. Not only, we say, oh, we need to connect to nature, but there's a reason. There's a physical, biological reason. Our physiology depends on it.
Absolutely, it does. Absolutely, it does. And so, yes, those of us in the equine-assisted field, we're trying to help the physiology, because the psychology is the physiology of others and ourselves. Mitochondria, nature. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. And
Oh, you're just the coolest person, Shea.
oh,
I always find out like 27 things I didn't know in like a given minute with you. It's extraordinary. I like to be made to feel dumb. It's good. It's healthy. Character building. All right, then. So till the next time, thank you again, and hopefully speak soon.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Join our website, newtrailslearning.com, to check out our online courses and live workshops in Horseboy Method, Movement Method, and Athena. These evidence-based programs have helped children, veterans, and people dealing with trauma around the world. We also offer a horse training program and self-care program for riders on longridehome.com. These include easy-to-do online courses and tutorials that bring you and your horse joy. For an overview of all shows and programs, go to rupertisaacson.com. See you on the next show. And please remember to press subscribe and share.